question about the time period covered in the film.
Well, I mean, it goes right up until now. The last little section you saw in the film, just before the credits, which shows the seeds of this starting to take root all over Africa, are things that really have just happened in the last 18 months, and things that were appearing only at the very last stage while we were only beginning to edit the film. But the stuff that we shot in Zimbabwe was the last shoot we did, and that was January 2011, so about a year and a half ago. And roughly speaking, the punk scene in the early part of the film goes up to the early 90s, and the end of the civil war in Mozambique and the end of apartheid in South Africa was roughly around the same time, in the mid-90s. And another stage developed, which was this more celebratory, ska-influenced kind of music, which also takes on a more African character. And then at the very end of the film, the stuff that you see taking place in the Afrikaans underworld in Pretoria with the visual artist Mark Kaname, 340mm in Maputo, Mozambique, and the various Zimbabwean things. That's all very contemporary. That's the stuff that's basically up to the minute and happening in the last few years. So in fact, the film is covering a span of about 4 years in time, over 7 different cities in 3 different countries, but it was important for us to tell this one story because that's how we felt it to be.
Yes, in the back. Question about any women's punk bands.
This is a question that surfaces often. Basically, there were a lot of women around the punk scene who we went out of our way to show them in photographs or in older material, who we, for various reasons, couldn't find or had, didn't want to be part of it for whatever reasons. And one of the women in the film from the band Kus apparently lives in New York, but nobody was able to really track her down, or she disappeared and no one had much contact with her. This woman who appears just before the credits with the band Mona in Mozambique, we did interview her. We did a nice interview with her, and it was in a rough cut of the film, but it just somehow didn't work. It wasn't able to make it into the final thing, but it was nice. It was interesting, and she was a very memorable and interesting character. So again, we wanted to include her in some way, even though the interview itself didn't make it into the film. And there were a lot of these people who were more peripheral or more marginal in the early days. As the story comes more up to the moment, there probably were where we had to make choices like, who do we focus on in Pretoria? Mark Kaname is an excellent character because he, first of all, is a visual artist who comes out of the punk scene, which we don't have otherwise. His take on Afrikaans identity and place in society in this very conservative town is so unique. And he just obviously presented himself as the main figure to speak for that particular scene. But the band who he's talking about, Sticky Antlers, which then became Makeovers, who were both in the film, is fronted by a woman, Martini Pelsa is her name. Like, she's someone we could have had her there instead of Kaname, but Kaname just seemed like a more well-rounded spokesperson for the idea. There was no conscious attempts to leave these people out, or to. We were aware that there was a certain gender imbalance, but it was more due to the outlines of how that whole scene developed. And some, like for example, Jen Hadlow, the photographer who appears in the film, we spend the whole day with her. And a lot of the photographs from the early days are her photographs. She was very instrumental in the whole project. She played a hugely influential role in terms of giving us ideas and putting us in touch with people. And she only appears on screen for maybe a minute and a half, but her role in the thing was actually quite large.
Same with Jackie.
Yeah, well, Jackie doesn't appear in the film, but another one of the still photographers who leaves a huge archive of 1990s stuff is our friend Jackie Feinstein from Johannesburg. So yeah, I mean there were a lot of women that we spoke to who were involved in the whole process, but when we sat down to edit the thing, we really focused on it from the point of view of the story, about everything, and didn't really give too much concern to who these people were in terms of their background or their language or their race or their gender, but just to try to capture the huge multiculturalism of the whole thing. But of course, I'm happy you asked the question because I'm happy to speak about it and to give credit to all those women who helped us along the way, some of whom, you know, their full contribution to in terms of interviews and so on didn't make the final cut, but was there at certain points in the process.
Question about whether the film has been shown in South Africa and or Eastern Europe, and what the reaction has been in those places.
What would you like to hear about first? I mean, actually the places we show this film now in a lot of parts of the world. It's one of the first screenings we've had in North America here tonight, so we're really happy to be here at the NYFF and show it here. But we've shown this film a lot of places in Europe. Where it has the best reception of anywhere that we show it is in Central Europe, in Berlin, in Prague, in Warsaw, also in Portugal, where it has really struck a certain nerve as well. And I think it's not an accident. It's because these are places where alternative music is also suppressed by various dictatorships, and people feel the story as their own story. When we show it in the Czech Republic, I mean, we've had, I think, 9 screenings in Prague and 6 were sold out. It has a huge response. It was sold out in Berlin. We had a huge response there. These places really take to the film, and they feel those connections which are just sort of hinted at in the film. They actually go even more deep than that. I had to try to force myself to keep some of this stuff out of the film because it was extremely interesting for us, but it could be a bit esoteric when we're showing the film all over the world. But the connections actually went very deep. In terms of the reception in Southern Africa, we've shown this film all over South Africa. It's been shown in all the major cities. What's also amazing, we've been invited to show this film at most of the major universities. So it's been shown at Stellenbosch, at the University of Witwatersrand, University of Johannesburg, the Swan Institute of Technology in Pretoria. It's been really well taken on as an educational thing, and South Africans have really warmed up to the film. We had great screenings in Durban at the International Film Festival there, where we did the world premiere. And what's great in South Africa is that the audiences are so mixed, not only in terms of race and social background, but also generations. So we had one screen in Cape Town, I think the age ran from 6 to early 80s. And it's just extraordinary to be able to show a film like this where people bring 4 generations of their whole family. And the film's been shown in Soweto, where it was also very well received. It's been on the biggest rock music outdoor festival in South Africa, Kopi, twice. They invited us back for the 2nd year. It was also shown in Maputo, where it had, again, a great reception, but that's also because of the wonderful presence of the band 340 Mill in film, who are really well loved and respected in Mozambique. And so yeah, it's received differently. I think there's a lot of hometown pride everywhere in Southern Africa when they see the film. People are just happy to see a less known aspect of their own story and be presented as something that is very positive in terms of its evaluation of the role of music within politics. In Europe, it's more that people feel the connection politically between the undergrounds. So it's only here in America that we get a late start to really finally get to bring it here and show it to you guys.
And there's been some great moments as well, just in terms of like the first time we showed it in Durban, a woman who was in her 70s was like one of the first people who spoke and said, "Thanks to your film, I understand what I didn't understand for years. Thank you for presenting it this way." Which does, you know, those are the moments you wish you could like film and show people, or like it made you feel like you did something worthwhile. A few weeks later, we showed it at the outdoor music festival he was talking about, and a younger black woman said, you know, all of her friends gave her such a hard time because she liked punk music, and this explained it in a way that she couldn't explain it. So, you know, there's been some great moments that, you know, you actually wait for as a filmmaker for people to say these things to make it worthwhile and feel like you did something which was worth the time. So it really has run the gamut, especially when people in like a record shop in Prague, and there's like 20 people there, can actually identify to it in a way that you never really thought about. So it's been pretty cool that way. It's been great.
I actually just want to ask, because when you mentioned 340 Millet, you know, just reminded me, you know, they're particularly impressive. There's a lot of great music in this film, and I'm wondering to what extent is this music, both the music of the 70s and the music of today, actually available outside of the realm of Southern Africa? How much of it can you find on the internet? How much of it is available for downloading? And have you given any thought to maybe producing a soundtrack album to go with the film?
Well, basically most of this music wasn't even available in Southern Africa for a long time because a lot of these records were actually banned or didn't come out legally in the first place. And for example, the National Wake LP only circulated in about 700 copies on its original release. As a direct result of us making the film, the National Wake album was re-released on CD. Now the Wild Youth and Gay Marines are jointly on one CD, which just came out also in the UK. The Kus album is re-released. All of these things are a result of us making the film, which is great that it's available and it can be ordered. In terms of downloads, not surprisingly, one of the most politically and technologically savvy people who dealt with making this film is Warwick Sony from the band Kalahari Surfers, and he got it together to actually put out on his new download only record label, which is called Shambach Music, a lot of these 1980s bands that otherwise had totally fallen through the cracks, like the Genuines, Kus, his own stuff. All of that's available. Also, this band, the Dread Warriors, which was like kind of a reggae offshoot of National Wake, by the two brothers, Gary and Panka Kosa, who unfortunately are no longer with us, so they're not in the film. Their family, Soweto, appeared in the film. So that's also available for download. And that's been a hugely rewarding thing that now, I mean, I get contacted by people on Facebook all the time through the film's page that they, you know, like young people in Brazil, in Chile, and Colombia, and say, wow, man, this is such amazing music in Africa that I've never heard of before. And yeah, that's been also one of the nice side effects. So yeah, the stuff is available. And I think that's one of the strongest things for me in making this film. It's not only that the politics and the ideology behind this music is worth getting behind, because of course it is, but these people are exceptional musicians, because in Africa people don't play around. Music is a really serious, deep cultural phenomenon, and even the punk musicians and DIY alternative people are seriously good musicians, and so some of the stuff is just unbelievably creative on a musical level, and I'm happy that the film gives some exposure to it.